we're going to look now at managing stress and money. So the goal by the end of this, you'll be able to define stress and analyze its effects on your life, which I feel like most of you probably already can do that. You'll be able to identify practical ways of managing stress, differentiate between needs and wants, prepare a budget and explain how to stick to it, discriminate between good and bad debt, and discuss how to use credit wisely. Almost anything is capable of producing stress. I'm sure you've realized this already. Good things, bad things, exciting things, scary things, they all can produce stress and a stress response. Stress is the physical and emotional response to events that threaten or challenge us. And there are three main types of stressors. We have cataclysmic events, so those are giant events, personal stressors, and then we have daily hassles. Living with stress, this is a nice little chart that identifies just the daily hassles and the percentage of people experiencing daily stress. So the number one most common daily stressor is not enough time, which I'm sure you guys have found throughout the last year, or semester at least. Too many things to do, troubling thoughts about the future, too many interruptions, misplacing or losing things, health of a family member, social obligations, concerns about standards, concerns about getting ahead, and too many responsibilities. And some people might only have a couple of those stressors on the list every day to deal with. Other people may have 4, 5, or 6 or more of those stressors to deal with every day. So dipping back to our previous lecture about empathy, remember that we never quite know what's going on in somebody else's life, and they may have a lot more going on than you, so we try to be a little bit empathetic to their needs. I'm just going to expand this for you. That's better. So stress, of course, brings on physical ramifications. It actually changes our physiology. Our hearts beat faster, breathing becomes more rapid and shallow. We produce more sweat, and our internal organs churn out a variety of hormones. So we start getting adrenaline-based hormones, we get all sorts of hormones, we get cortisol that's trying to help us deal with the stress. All of these hormones are just getting pumped out. These symptoms wear down our immune system over time and leave us open to disease. So that could be something as simple as the common cold. And then, of course, larger implications could be diseases like heart disease, headaches or migraines, and even stroke. And of course, newer studies, what they're starting to find, they're starting to look at the relationship between the incidence of cancer and chronic stress. So things to keep in mind for all of us who run high with stress all the time or have anxiety that's constantly poking its head out at us. The sooner you're able to get a support system and get a method for coping, the better you are off long term. Even if that means that it prevents you from getting chronic colds. That can be a big deal. So looking at managing stress, coping is the effort to control, reduce, or tolerate the threats that lead to stress. We can't avoid stress altogether, but we can learn to cope to manage it in a realistic and practical method. Being in good physical shape can literally help us manage stress. The stronger you are physically, the less toll stress will take on you. Reducing things like caffeine intake can certainly help reduce the level of chronic anxiety and stress that your body feels, and especially the physiological signs associated with it. And then, of course, dealing with obesity as well, as linked back to that stronger you are physically, the less toll stress will take on you. So things like that surprisingly can have a massive effect on managing stress. And what that's looking at is general health and then how your general health affects your physiology. So how does your general health and your strength affect your heart rate, affect how your body's dealing with stress coming in, and how your body's dealing with that increase in hormones. And then we have things that we have to consider, which is emotional intelligence and stress management. So we have students who are really, we look at the different types of emotional intelligences, and that's long ways ago based on self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So looking at that as the basis of overall emotional intelligence, we have that in comparison to individuals who are emotionally reactive and how they manage stress. So looking at the difference between the two characteristics, we have characteristics of emotionally reactive students. Students are generally overwhelmed quite often, very reactive to stress, driven by emotion, self-doubting, resistant to change, aggressive or non-assertive communicators. Performance decreases under stress. They may be pessimistic, sarcastic, and continually make the same mistakes. Whereas individuals who have emotional intelligence, really well-rounded emotional intelligence, they may be more resilient, proactive, planned responses to stress, do things with reflection and intention, self-confident, flexible and open to change, assertive communicators, performance improves under stress, optimistic, positive, and hopeful focus, and they may learn more from their experiences. So again, focusing on self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, those are the characteristics that are common for individuals who have a well-rounded state of emotional intelligence. And of course, emotional intelligence can help us cope with stress. It can help make us more resilient against the effects of stress. So looking at some effective coping strategies, a variety of tactics can help you deal with your stressors. Definitely taking charge of the situation. Don't try to change the unchangeable. Looking for the silver lining. So if we look at this whole COVID-19 social distancing, physical distancing that we're all undergoing right now, there's a lot of stress involved in that. There's a lot of downsides involved in that. We can't see our families. We can't see our friends. We can't even go out to a restaurant. Anything like that is unchangeable. We cannot change that. That's the way it is. We have a pandemic. However, we can start to look at some silver linings. So looking at that, for me, a silver lining is definitely I'm home with the kids more, which is a challenge, but it's also really fantastic to watch them learn and grow. I'm home with my partner a lot more. Again, that can be a challenge, but to see all of us parent together with the family, it's really quite nice. So there are always little silver linings to all of this. And hey, I can lecture in my pajamas if I wanted to. Another silver lining. Use social support from friends and family. Try to relax. I know that's the worst thing when people try to tell you to relax if you're really stressed out. So don't say that to other people, but you, the individual who's undergoing stress at that moment, truly attempt some coping strategies to help yourself relax, whether that's breathing, whether that's meditation, whatever it may be. And wimping out doesn't work. Keep your commitments. So if you are finding that you're always sort of canceling commitments, or you're constantly that person who gets overwhelmed, overstressed, and then you cancel last minute, whatever that may be, if it's work, if it's social events, if it's commitments, keep in mind it's ideal to keep your commitments because that over time will help you reinforce that resilience in yourself. It will help you learn how to cope with those stressful situations. And then trying as much as possible to place stress in perspective. So try not to sweat the small stuff. Put your circumstances into perspective. Everybody's going to have a different level of ability to do this. For some people, getting an 89% is a great mark. They wanted a 90, but an 89 is pretty darn good. For other people, getting an 89 when they wanted 90 is devastating. So try your best to keep things in perspective and make peace with stress. So a life with no challenges would be boring. I totally agree with that. No matter how much it stresses us out, sometimes if you can learn to become resilient against stress and be able to cope with stress over time, then think about how exciting life can be with some of those stressors. Juggling your responsibilities, so looking at your priorities, which could be childcare, could be school, could be work. All of those generally are equally as important and demanding responsibilities. Use proven time management techniques. So we've talked about a lot of these time management techniques throughout the semester, this whole semester course. Communicate with others about your obligations, so don't be shy to tell people that you can't do it because of this, or you know what, you would love to help, however, you have 6 other things that you're working on this week and now's not the best week. Multitask as much as possible, so keeping yourself busy. And then don't put your own needs last. So going back to that whole concept of self-care, which is so on trend right now, self-care and loving yourself and giving yourself the best and those moments of time off, whatever you need to do, don't put your own needs last. So if your body is screaming out to you that you're overdone, you're stressed, you're starting to become sick, make sure that you're satisfying your own needs. If you need to take a sick day, if you need to take a mental health day, things like that are okay. And then, of course, that general self-care, that idea, just keeping well. So there's a whole bunch of lifestyle habits that can make a massive difference when we want to deal with stress. So eating right, eating a variety of whole foods, including fruit, veggies, and grains. Avoid foods high in sugar, fat, cholesterol, and salt. Less is more. Eat 3 regular meals a day and snacks in between. Whatever it may be, I mean, these are all just general guidelines, and I'm not here to tell you how to eat, but realistically, make sure that you're eating well. I know a lot of us, when we get stressed, we get into a habit of just grabbing whatever is quick and easy, going to comfort foods, things that make us feel comfortable in that moment. However, keeping in mind that high levels of sugar, high levels of caffeine are not going to be ideal for coping and managing your stress. And then, of course, we know all about this. Again, I'm not here to teach you how to exercise or anything like that, but it is proven that having a regular exercise routine or a regular activity in your daily life can certainly help you reduce your stress levels and cope with stress more effectively. Likewise, studies have shown that definitely getting a good night's sleep is super important, and that can help you be well rested for the next day. When you're well rested, you're able to make decisions more appropriately and more efficiently. And a lot of studies recommend having a bedtime routine, kind of like you would for a child, but having a bedtime routine. So roughly keeping the same bedtime as much as possible, whether it's reading a book before bed, having a bath before bed, whatever works for you, that's fine. But having a regular bedtime routine can just help you manage that consistent level of sleep. And I'm sure you guys have all been there. You know the difference in your ability to cope with stress and manage decision making when you are well slept compared to when you are very poorly slept. And there's a significant difference in your abilities there. Okay, so looking at stress, thinking about stress, we're going to move on to managing your money. Because you guys are getting into that time in your life, if you haven't been already, where you are going to be looking for jobs in your career, and you'll have some independence with your money and your income. So looking at managing money, we have to consider things that's going to make our money last longer over time. So distinguishing your needs from your wants. How much disposable income do you have? Can you postpone a purchase? So do you need to purchase that thing right now? Or could you wait a little while? Avoid shopping until you have a real need. And then, of course, create a budget. So all of these are proven strategies to ensuring that your money stays with you as long as possible. And I don't know if anybody else is feeling this, but with this COVID-19 quarantine situation, this is very real. I feel like Amazon is so popular right now, and so many people are ordering things online, and it's like every day I have to have that conversation with myself. Avoid shopping until you have a real need. So do I need it or do I want it? It's a real challenge. Okay, looking at the preparation phase of managing your money, track the money coming in and going out. So get an idea of what you actually have in regard to money. Look at your take-home pay. What other sources of funds can you count on? Go through records that you've kept to identify previous spending. And now, pretty much everybody uses online banking now. So that's a really great way to go through your banking, look at all the transactions, and categorize it. What are you spending your money on? And keep track of all the little items, all those tiny little things that we buy. Every time you buy a bag of chips at the cafeteria, etc., etc., all those coffees, they add up. And then all of a sudden, your budget's getting eaten away. In the organization phase associated with managing your money, prepare a budget. So there's a lot of various resources out there for managing and preparing a budget. I will not be teaching you all about that, just the general basics, but definitely you can Google it. As always, Gail Vaz Oxalase is an excellent Canadian resource for preparing a budget. Figure out how much money is coming in and how much is going out, and include some savings in your budget. You don't want to be caught out when you need the money. And then working on this, you need to balance your budget. So if you spend more than you make, then you have to look at that and you have to acknowledge that as the number one. So you need to decrease spending, control impulse buying, make and take your own lunch. Things like that can be very helpful. Plan major purchases to coincide with sales. Shop at consignment or thrift stores, buy used rather than new, share and trade, and just in general live more simply. So this is for people, of course, the key here is if you're spending more than you make. That's where we need to start making the adjustments. If you are spending way less than you make, then you want to consider things like putting extra money away for savings. But otherwise, looking at how much are you making, how much are you spending, and where do you need to prioritize your money and where can you cut back on your spending. And then once you make this budget and you initially go through it, let's say you have your first month where you're paying attention to your budget and you're looking at your ins and outs financially, don't forget to go back to this budget. So don't make it be a one-time thing. It doesn't need to be set in stone. Ideally review it monthly or at least at the end of each term. So that could be each semester, that could be quarterly, however you so choose to set it up. And keep your expenditures or your spending in control. Keep it under control. Things like this can flare up with stress. Everybody reacts to stress differently. Some people, definitely have issues around motivation when they're stressed. Some people are completely the opposite and they get extremely motivated. Some people have issues around eating when they're stressed. And some people have issues around spending when they're stressed. And it's good for you to be able to recognize those symptoms and those signs as they're happening by keeping a budget. And that will help you long-term support your own wealth and your management of money. And then it's always important to revisit your budget when circumstances change. So examples, you guys are going to have a lot of changes potentially in the next 5 years. You might be moving out, so you might be either moving in with somebody, moving away from somebody. You might have education funds that worked really well while you're in school and now they're depleted. Maybe your rent costs increase, maybe you decide to buy a house, you get a mortgage, or maybe you lose your job, which can be really, really scary. So definitely look at your budget when circumstances change. A perfect example, again, is right now during this COVID-19, this whole lack of work for a lot of people. A lot of people, and I'm sure people in your family have been doing it as well, have to look at their income, look at their expenditures, and identify what is a priority and what can be cut at this time. A lot of people are out right now, and it was very much unexpected. It's a pandemic. So also when we're talking about management of money, we have to connect the concept of using credit wisely. So we know that we get credit and we get credit scores every time we sign up for a credit card. That's like actual financial credit. And then our credit scores are also affected by things like cell phone bills. A lot of companies who bill us monthly or annually can affect our credit scores if we miss payments as well. So it's important to know what can potentially affect your credit and then how to use that wisely. Good debt is an investment in your future. Bad debt is the kind that stems from borrowing to buy something you don't need and can't afford. So what they generally say, things like mortgages can be good debt as long as it's a mortgage that you technically can afford and you're not house poor. So you're not devoting the majority of your income to your house. And then of course, bad debt is things like consumer debt. So looking at an exceptional amount of charges on your credit card. If you're a big spender, you like to go on ski trips, you like to spend money at the bar, whatever it may be, that becomes bad debt and it can really affect you long term. So credit cards, always ensure you can pay off the purchase in full upon the due date. Overall, credit cards have really high interest rates. Typically, we're looking at about 20% interest. Interest piles up super quickly, and if you're not checking your transactions all the time, then that can escape you, and you won't realize that you've been charged for interest over and over again. Cash advances should only be used in dire emergencies, and that includes those places like Cash Money and, I don't know, all those cash advance stores. They definitely will affect your credit score over time. And then looking at them, credit cards are a widely accepted payment method, and sometimes there's no alternative, so sometimes you're kind of forced to use them. And on a good side, it can build up your credit rating. So by using them, it can be beneficial. It's going to build up your credit rating. However, if you can't pay your bill, then that can do the opposite and it can degrade your credit rating. So looking at some steps to help you deal with financial difficulties. So if you end up getting in over your head and the stress is piling up, and I'm sure for a lot of you, financial stress is a massive reality. I think that that is a massive reality for many, many people right now. So looking at some steps, we've got assess the problem. So make a list of what you owe and to whom. Figure out a reasonable amount you can put toward each debt and work out a specific plan. Contact each of your creditors. Start with your bank, credit card companies, and landlord. Explain the situation. Show them your plan to pay off the debt. A lot of times, just by making that contact, you can really reduce the amount that you'll pay per month or the amount of interest that you'll have to pay. They like to see you doing your part. See a credit counselor. If you can't work out a repayment plan on your own, visit a credit counseling service. Your bank or creditor can help you identify a credit counselor. Also, a lot of times there are financial services offered with alumni services. So once you graduate from a college or university, they often have alumni services like that to offer you. And then stick to the plan. Once you have a plan, make a commitment to stick to it because it's not going to get better on its own. And then, of course, you know the stress that's involved when finances are not in gear. If they just continue and continue because you haven't stuck to the plan, that's going to be a lifetime of stress. So looking at a summary, what is stress and how can I control it? What is involved in keeping fit and healthy and why is it important for me to do so? What are reasons for keeping a budget and how can I prepare and stick to one? What is the difference between good and bad debt and how do I ensure I use credit wisely? And then I just wanted to show you on the topic of stress, I had sent this around to you guys this past week. Just to note that Georgian College has offered 14 free apps to help manage anxiety and stress. And of course, they say, it's during COVID-19, but these can be used at any point. So I just want you to be aware of some of the things that are offered to you or available to you for free. Most of these have a free mode, and then of course you can pay to have the pro version, but there's a whole bunch of them that can help with meditation. Some of them are specific for sleep. Some of them are problem-solving tools that can help you deal with emotions and cope with stress, etc., etc. So this is a list of 14 of them, and it can be really beneficial if you can get on board with a couple of them. Even at the end, the What's Up app can challenge your negative thinking patterns and help you cope with feelings and track habits and more. So again, looking at your own patterns when it comes to coping with stress can be really helpful for you in developing a plan. And that is all.